Are you ready? It's coast to coast, we're here and we representing. Tom join her foundation. We about to jump right in it. The body is woke. HBCUs, let's go. Tradition, trendsetting. Let's do it for the culture. HBCUbiquity.
Welcome to the Tom Joyner Foundation presents HBCUbiquity. I'm your host, Thomas Joyner Jr., and on behalf of the Tom Joyner Foundation, thank you for joining us on today. Question: what is the most important issue facing HBCU students on today? If you answered cost of attendance, or academic requirements for entry, or student loans, or even the career viability of degrees from our schools, or a host of other issues, you wouldn't be wrong. But mental health should, and hopefully is, somewhere on your list of answers. I wanted to have today's conversation about mental health as I recently attended a conference for Black educators in higher education, and I came across a roundtable discussion led by a sister on the staff at North Carolina A&T University about mental health issues at HBCUs. And right there on the spot, I thought to myself that this is a conversation that needs to occur on HBCUbiquity. I'm not a counselor. The closest that I've come to being qualified to lead this kind of discussion is that I took intro to psychology during my freshman year at Howard, and that's because it was required. But as we're almost towards the end of June, the next academic year is only a few weeks away, and we'll be here before we know it. And that's why this is a conversation with the purpose of understanding about what's going on today on our campuses and with our students. In the next segment, we'll talk with Dr. Kellie Dixon, Director of Student Affairs Assessment at North Carolina A&T, and the sister whose roundtable I just mentioned a few seconds ago. Dr. Dixon will talk with us about some of the common, for lack of a better term, mental health issues and concerns that she's observed in her work and interaction with HBCU students, and knowledge that we as HBCU alums and supporters need to be aware of. In the segment after that, we'll talk with Dr. Annelle Primm, a psychiatrist and senior medical advisor of the Steve Fund. Dr. Primm will drill down a little deeper to elaborate on additional topics and road signs, so to speak, about mental health issues at HBCUs. But she'll also expand the conversation to touch upon mental health challenges of Black students that attend non-HBCUs, or PWIs as they are commonly referred to. Of course, as always, please let us know your thoughts and opinions about mental health at HBCUs by hitting us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and the Gram at HBCUbiquity. That's HBCUbiquity. Thanks for being a part of this week's conversation, and let's get started. Welcome to another episode of HBCUbiquity.
Before we get back to the HBCUbiquity podcast, let's take a look at some Tom Joyner Foundation fundraising highlights. Here's an example of TJF's success.
Hi, my name is Brenna Daniel. I'm a sophomore and aviation science major from Morganton, North Carolina. After completing my degree, I hope to fly for Samaritan's Purse, an international disaster relief ministry. I'd like to thank First Citizens Bank and the Tom Joyner Foundation for the scholarship and helping me to achieve my dream.
To donate to the Tom Joyner Foundation, just log on to www.tomjoynerfoundation.org and you can help a student continue their education at a HBCU.
Welcome back to HBCUbiquity. I'm your host, Thomas Joyner Jr., and I'm joined today by Dr. Kellie M. Dixon, Director of Student Affairs Assessment and Staff Development at North Carolina A&T University. Good afternoon, Dr. Dixon. How are you today?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. How's everything at A&T today?
It is a nice chilly day today. Quiet. No, not too many students here as we've finished commencement and the students have moved on to their homes and preparing for summer school.
But there's still Aggie Pride?
Always Aggie Pride.
Even us Howard Bisons can do Aggie Pride. It's okay.
Always Aggie Pride.
So as someone who deals with students day in and day out, why do you feel that mental health at HBCUs is an important topic to discuss?
Well, first, I think the mental health, regardless of the institution type, is important. And even more so at HBCUs where we're working with people of color, our Black students. When you think about the stigma of mental health in the Black community, it's always, just pray about it, go to church. You don't really need to talk to a therapist type of mindset. And so coming into an institution that's dedicated to Black students, and you're thinking about the foundation of the institution, you're thinking about what's going on in society now, especially with suicide rates, the bullying, the different issues that students face on a day-to-day basis, those that we see and those that we can't see. It's very important for us to have those open communications, open conversations with students and staff about mental health at all levels. And it's also, for me, it's personal in terms of, it's not just one person's position to handle mental health issues, even though we have counseling services, but students can go to anyone at any time. So I think it's very important that at HBCUs, we're open about the conversation of mental health amongst Black people.
And so why are you so dedicated to this issue?
Well, my master's degree is in counseling, and so I became very interested in this whole idea of helping individuals get the help that they need, regardless of what that looks like at an early age. And given all the students go through, from what they deal with at home, what they deal with on campus, and then other personal issues, it's a lot to take on and have no one to talk to. And so for me, I always want to be that person that an individual student can come and talk to, even if I am to refer them to counseling, but giving them that space where they can be who they are and not have a sense of judgment because they may be dealing with some type of mental health.
Dr. Dixon, in your observation, what are some of the specific mental health issues and concerns that are unique to Black male students at HBCUs?
Wow, that's a great question. I have a lot of quite a number of Black male mentees, and I would say one is understanding who they are for themselves, not based off of what society says or what story someone has written about them. Being open about emotions. Emotions is a big thing that I find with Black males, is not being able to express their emotions for the fear of not being, quote unquote, a man if I cry. So to speak. I think it's some identity issues, some issues of this whole gender roles and what men should do versus women should do, and how to navigate that, especially in the new this new society of students that are coming to campus. Mm-hmm. We talk about the LGBTQIA community and being Black and what that looks like, and not only being Black, but being a male too. And talking about manness. And so I think when it comes to Black male students at HBCUs and mental health, for me, in my observation, it's being able to express your emotions, dealing with depression, what that looks like, because you have everyone that's dependent on you, and you're not wanting to fail them. Identity development as well, and also intersecting identities. And so looking at what makes me who I am, from my race, my sexual orientation, to my socioeconomic status, all those things, and how that works together to be who I am as a Black male. And sometimes when we're working with Black males, it could be that I'm only focused on the fact that you're a Black male. I'm not focused on the fact that you come from the rural area or from the North or from the South. And so being able to address all of those identities within an individual, especially a Black male student, is what I've seen to be most critical when you talk about mental health issues.
Dr. Dixon, I want to go back to something you just said at the beginning of that answer. You mentioned about Black males having an aversion, so to speak, to deal with mental health. And frankly, that's been a concern within our community for over 100 years. Right. Why do you feel that that is still an important concern, and some of the reasons why that's a concern?
Vulnerability. No one wants to seem vulnerable. We all kind of want to show that we have it all together because, in society, being Black, we already have strikes against us per se. And so adding on the issues that we may face mentally, it's just another reason for others to kind of take another jab at us, so to speak. And so for me, I think, it's really important to be open and honest because the more you keep in issues and keeping things to yourself, you get to a moment and you just explode at the wrong time, whatever that may look like, which can also be termed as negative to different races when they're looking at us as Blacks. And so it's really critical. It's one of those things that me growing up, I didn't talk a lot about mental health issues being a Black woman. And I was raised around a good number of Black males, and, my observation has been, it's kind of have to put on this face, this front that I'm strong, that I can handle it all because I've been through it all, etc. But that sometimes I have to sit back and say, I am depressed or something's really going on here and I do need to seek help. I just can't pray about it. I just can't sit on the altar, so to speak, and let it pass me by. I have to actually do something about it.
And with that said, I want to pivot to another. Sorry about this, but I want to pivot to another piece you just said in that answer. In your experiences and from your observations, how important is prayer and spirituality in dealing with these issues?
Personally, I think it's very important. However, I don't think it's the end all. We all have our own spiritual background, our own religious background. Me, myself, I'm more spiritual than religious. I believe in a higher being. I believe in God. I don't believe I have to answer to a certain type of religion per se. And, for me, it's faith. And so when you're dealing with individuals, we all have our different morals, values, beliefs. And for most Blacks, the spirituality, the religious is the foundation of who we are and how we operate. And so it is a very important piece of who we are. However, I believe that in that, when you think about the holistic wellness wheel, you have 8 dimensions of wellness, and spiritual is just one component of that. Emotional is another, physical, occupational, etc. And so when one is out of sync, your whole wellness, your whole well-being is out of sync. And so for me, being able to understand who you are in those different dimensions of wellness is critical, not just spiritual, even though I do believe spiritual is a key foundation.
What are some of the specific mental health concerns and issues that are unique to female students at HBCUs?
Female students, I would have to say imposter syndrome is an issue that I believe most especially Black females, but females in general, may be going through, especially on a college campus. And that's saying, am I good enough to be here? Am I supposed to be here? Mm-hmm. I come from, low socioeconomic background, and I'm in college. I'm the first in my generation, and questioning, are you supposed to be here? How are you supposed to get through it when you're the first? So that imposter syndrome, I think, is an issue which comes with anxiety and depression and burnout. Trying to be everything to everyone and forgetting to be yourself to who you are. That's self-care, lack of self-care, defining what self-care is and what that looks like, and not having a lot of role models to demonstrate how you're supposed to care for yourself without burning yourself out. I think it's another piece for females on campus as well. And so as a Black female administrator at A&T, it's important for me to role model to students, whether female or male, that we're all human, one. We all go through things. We're not perfect, but there are certain ways that we can cope and handle what we're going through in life, and we don't have to do it alone. We don't have to kind of fix ourselves per se without getting help from other people. That's what the Counseling Center is for. That's what student affairs professionals are here for. That's what the support staff is here for, faculty staff. We're here to help the students become better versions of themselves in any capacity.
Another reason why people should be considering HBCUs, period, because of that support and because there are support from people like yourselves that look like the students that have been where they are. And that's, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate hearing that. Dr. Dixon, college life is about more than it's a classroom experience, as you know.
Yes.
So what are some of the mental health issues that our students are dealing with outside of the classroom?
I would still say some of the things that I stated before, kind of dealing with maybe some signs of depression, anxiety, especially for our students that are first generation. They didn't have anyone or don't have anyone to kind of talk to them about what the experience is like. So they're really doing it for themselves for the first time and not knowing kind of which way to go. Trying to be everything to everybody, trying to be so involved in everything on campus because, you hear the whole saying, the more involved you're in, the more successful you'll be. And if you don't do that properly, you can truly burn yourself out as a student. And so you have students that may withdraw for whatever reasons or may not make it to graduation. And so I think outside the classroom is the same that's inside the classroom in terms of anxiety, depression, like I stated before, imposter syndrome, especially among women. And just kind of, for me, I really think it is identity, understanding who you are. And most times when you're coming in as a freshman, you don't truly know everything about who you are. And then you're into the space where you're meeting new people and they're able to define who you are. And if you're not careful, their story about you becomes your story. And that can also be troubling too in terms of anxiety and being depressed, etc.
It's interesting that you mentioned about, having so many options and that can burn people out, because obviously, as you know, and as many of our podcast listeners know, A&T is one of those campuses that is full of options for all kinds of students.
Yeah, a little bit.
So it's interesting that you point that out as, as a potential obstacle as opposed to what's often pointed out as a selling point for a school like A&T. But you mentioned twice now imposter syndrome. For a bit of our listeners who are not aware of that term, can you explain what imposter syndrome is?
Yeah, so my definition of imposter syndrome is basically you're in a space where you're questioning if you should be there. So for an example, maybe I am a Black female, I'm educated, I have a doctorate degree, but if I apply for a director position, I may still feel like I don't deserve it. I'm not qualified enough for it. For whatever reason. And a lot of that for me is because of society says that, Black women can't do certain things, or it's seen for Black women to have these types of positions. This is a male-oriented position, whatever the case may be. So doubting yourself, even though you do necessarily have the qualifications to be there.
Dr. Dixon, I guess this next one is a two-part question. The first part is, what are some of the steps that HBCUs like A&T are doing to address mental health for our students? And the second part is, how can we as alumni and HBCU supporters assist with the efforts of our schools?
Okay. So one of the things that we're doing here at A&T that I'm extremely proud of with our counseling center, they are always training, staff and giving workshops and webinars available to students and staff so that we're always on the know of what's going on, from bystander intervention to there's a program that's titled the Hip Hop Cipher that uses hip hop lyrics to kind of address mental health issues with students. And so one of the things that I'm really, once again, is just the training that we're doing, and that is continuous and consistent. And that students are heavily utilizing our counseling center. And not only just the counseling center, but we understand that it is a university responsibility to be there for students. And so even if you refer a student to counseling, they feel that they still just want to talk to you, that we're there to have those conversations. But ultimately know that counseling center is where you want to have them end up. And so it's kind of a collaborative effort when we're dealing with students. The steps we take here at A&T.
And how can we as alumni and supporters, help you help our students?
Yeah, and so I think as alumni and supporters of HBCUs, it's not to be blind to what's going on, okay. To show up, not to just homecoming events and, the social events, but even events where we're talking about these issues that pertain to our students. And even when we are recruiting, because we know that at HBCUs, we utilize our alumni in terms of recruiting for workforce. And so being open about what support systems that they have on the job assist if someone is dealing with mental health. And so just kind of being a well-rounded support system that not only just provides some type of service, but also a listening ear. And being in an assessment, I'm always big on assessing the population in which you're working with. And so as alumni, you've been there before. We've been in their shoes per se before. And as supporters, we understand the space of HBCUs, the need for us to be supportive. And so continue to understand who our students are. Students, some of the issues that students are facing now, we probably faced 30 years ago, but how we handle them are different. So being up to date on the trends of how we can be supporting the conversation, the dialogue that we're having with students that are going to be alumni.
Dr. Dixon, my last question for you is: do you have any final words or thoughts about mental health challenges on our campuses?
Wow. One, don't judge a book by its cover. Talk to every student. When you see a student on campus and when they're not having the earplugs in their ears and you got that, have a conversation with them, not just the hello and the goodbye, but actually interact with them, engage with the students. In my experience, that's what they want. They want to be able to come to a campus and have real conversations with staff that have been in their places before. And so being open and honest, being transparent, continuous training in mental health and the trends that are happening both inside and outside the classroom, in the different workforce fields, and also within student affairs and higher ed, and remaining open, keeping your ear to the pulse, per se, especially within the Black community, because when you look at society and what's going on in the world, we're losing our children at very young ages because of mental health issues. And so I always encourage staff, faculty, anyone who's working with college students or students in general, is to always be open and transparent and do more than a hi and a goodbye.
Okay. And like you do more than a hi and a goodbye, and don't judge a book by its cover. Yes. And so I guess that means that on the flip side of that, us old heads are back in style now on campus. They want to talk to us too.
That's a good point. So I think that we learn a lot because of not just our age, but our experience. And sometimes students can't see that until we have those intentional conversations with them. And make it more of a conversation and not, this is what I did, you should do the same, but more of a conversation.
Well, Dr. Dixon, thank you very much for your time today. We met a few weeks ago at a conference in Indianapolis, and I happened to walk in on your roundtable discussion about this topic, and I knew right then, or by the end of the conversation, that I wanted to talk to you about this. So thank you very much for your candor and openness today about all of this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
You have a great day, and we'll be back with more HBCUbiquity.
Before we get back to the HBCUbiquity podcast, let's take a look at some Tom Joyner Foundation fundraising highlights. Here's an example of TJF's success.
Hi, my name is Dante Webb, a junior majoring in physics at Dillard University. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the Dillard University Dallas Alumni Chapter and Tom Joyner Foundation for providing me with this scholarship. After graduation, I will attend Georgia Tech to obtain my master's in mechanical engineering.
To donate to the Tom Joyner Foundation, just log on to www.tomjoynerfoundation.org and you can help a student continue their education at a HBCU.
Welcome back to HBCUbiquity. I'm now joined by Dr. Annelle Primm, psychiatrist and senior medical advisor at the Steve Fund. How are you today, Dr. Primm?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thanks for being part of today's conversation with a purpose.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Dr. Primm, from your perspective, what are the most important mental health issues concerning or facing, that is, college students of color on today?
Well, college students of color are like other students in that the stresses of that time period, transitioning from adolescence into adulthood, it's a very stressful time of development. And it's not uncommon for young people in this age group to experience things like anxiety and depression and so forth. And for those sorts of mental health concerns, they typically appear, during late adolescence, early adulthood. But what is unique about students of color is that in addition to the usual kind of developmental kind of mental health issues that pop up kind of universally, they deal with the added burdens brought by racism and racial discrimination and racial profiling and microaggressions, these sorts of things that occur in society and are really much more pronounced now than they have been in a long time. And so, students of color may experience psychological distress in relationship to those kinds of negative forces that they may face. So, and whatever kind of challenges may arise from, just being a member of the Black community, all of the issues that we face on a day-to-day basis are, some of the challenges that students of color have to deal with too. So it really compounds that whole developmental period, and, hopefully people have supports to help them get through that and help them cope and manage and be resilient.
Dr. Primm, why are you so passionate about mental health for students, especially college students of color? What's behind your passion?
Well, I've been a psychiatrist for, going on 40 years. It's been a long time. And, mental health is just so central to our overall health and well-being in all different sorts of domains. And, for young people, they're our future. And so a lot of my focus has been on making sure that young people have the supports that they need in order to navigate, life's stressors and difficulties. And of course, these are inevitable for all of us. But my passion is to equip young people with the tools, to help them navigate the trials and tribulations of life successfully, and to come out whole and grounded, and with a positive attitude about the future, and being able to contribute to society and have a positive sense of self and a sense of well-being and quality of life.
And Dr. Primm, for those of our listeners that may be wondering, which HBCU did you attend?
I went to Howard Medical School. I'm a proud graduate, 1980. It was a very validating experience for me because I had been very much in the minority in most of the other schools that I had attended through my development. But coming to Howard for medical school, was really a highlight of my educational experience. And, my peers and my professors, I had a sense of belonging that I had never felt before. And I think that validation has really grounded me as a professional, as a physician, and being a part of the community of Black physicians across the country has been, just a wonderful gift to learn with my true peers, both in terms of my studies and also culturally. So I see that as a real benefit to me personally.
Dr. Primm, earlier we were discussing some of the differences in mental health challenges faced by students attending HBCUs versus Black students that attend PWIs. Can you elaborate on that for our listeners?
Well, as I was saying a little earlier about, the mental health experiences of young people in this age group, there's a lot of commonality there, no matter where you go to school or no matter what your background is. However, students, for instance, African-American students who attend HBCUs, one of the issues that they probably won't have to face is racism and racial discrimination and microaggressions. And maybe there are occasional experiences of that, perhaps from professors, from a different cultural background. But I would think that would be, fairly rare. And so the issue of being marginalized on campus, or experiencing, negative racial events on campus is very unlikely. However, on predominantly white institutions, where students of color and Black students in particular are in the minority, these sorts of things do occur. And, for those keeping up with the media, there have been a number of examples of this, even last week or so. And so that's one main difference. However, for students of color, Black students on historically Black institution campuses, they may be okay on campus, but once they step out of that campus boundary into the general community, especially if the surrounding community has aggressive policing, that they're going to be subject to, racial profiling, and at risk for, any sort of untoward consequences, as we have seen all over the country in the last few years. So, the racism and racial discrimination and bias and profiling that happens in our general society, can happen to students no matter what kind of campus that they're on. So no one is really completely protected from this, but in many instances, the HBCU institution is really kind of a cocoon of protection, if you will, for students who attend there, as far as these kinds of racial dynamics are concerned.
As you know, HBCU service a large number of students that are the first generation in their families, among the first generation in their families to attend college. What are some of these specific mental health concerns that are unique to first generation students on today?
Well, first generation students, I believe that many of them have the challenge of being the first in their family to attend college, and therefore they may not have the benefit of family members who could kind of, show them the ropes or help guide them and support them. So it makes it that much harder for first generation students to navigate the whole college experience. And so that could put them at risk of having additional stress and anxiety about, what they will face in college. Some things that they may not be aware of, certain pressures, certain expectations. But I must say that, many first generation students do independently, kind of figure out what they need to do. And hopefully they have professors, advisors, and peers, who are willing to be helpful and lend a hand. But there is a risk that, being in a completely new environment, not having any coaching, at least from the family, on some tips on how to successfully manage the college experience, it may make it a little more difficult for them. I think that can be overcome, and often it is, but it does make it a bit harder. So I think we need to be cognizant of that and be very supportive of first generation students to make their transition and their tenure in the college environment as positive and smooth as possible.
Dr. Primm, from your perspective, does the amount of social media usage among college students concern you?
Well, I'm kind of a middle of the road on that. Yes and no. I'll start with no first, because I think that social media and just the advent of some of the new technologies have been fantastic for helping young people communicate with each other in very creative ways. And social media has actually become a way that people are learning more about, mental health and mental health issues, and raising awareness and helping to reduce stigma. Many advocates around mental health in the Black community have been, coming out on Twitter and Instagram talking about their experiences and encouraging people to get help if they are going through tough times from a mental health standpoint. So I think all of that is great, as a communications tool and as an education tool. On the other hand, social media complete reliance on that as a form of communication, I think could affect the healthy development of young people because they may have fewer face-to-face interactions, and that may, I would say that could interfere with optimal social development, which is, a very important aspect of, emerging into adulthood. So it may result in people missing opportunities to interact face to face with their peers. And of course, social media has become an avenue for some people who are negative and bullying and this sort of thing. And, for folks who fall prey to that or are victims of cyberbullying, that's really a terrible thing. And some unfortunate things have happened as a result. So I think with most things, doing it in moderation is really the key. I also know that social media has made people very conscious of their physical appearance, and folks are taking selfies and sending them and showing what they're doing here, there, and everywhere. Another aspect of this culturally is that we were raised not to put all our business in the street, like where we had breakfast and who we went to visit, and pictures here, pictures there, everywhere. And so that worries me sometimes because people can end up being really tracked and clocked when they chronicle their lives, their everyday lives, through social media. But, I have to understand that's an aspect of youth culture. And, many young people enjoy communicating that way. And I'm not going to judge. It's different than how I came up. But I'm learning more. I have a daughter myself who just finished college, HBCU, by the way, Xavier. And
congratulations, by the way.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And, she uses social media, and I've learned a lot from her. She got me on Twitter, got me on Instagram. And so I've been able to view, some of these communications. So I think there are positive and negative aspects to it, but the key is, really keeping it in moderation.
Dr. Primm, my last question for you is, in your opinion, what else can colleges and universities do in terms of mental health for students of color?
Well, I think that they need to create a campus environment in which mental health is not, the issue of mental health is not hidden or buried, but rather brought out in the open, and to make sure there are opportunities for students to learn about mental health and some of the stressors that college students typically go through, making sure that there are resources on campus for mental health services, whether that be through the counseling center or through, let's say, the infirmary, because some people may feel more comfortable, seeing a primary care physician or nurse or physician's assistant as opposed to, seeing a mental health professional. Right. But I think, just placing a value on mental health and reducing some of the stigma that may surround it, so that people can know that, it's mental health and mental illness are real things, that it can affect even Black students, and that there are services and supports available, including peer support, which has been found to be very helpful.
Yes.
Young people often prefer going to young people, and then they can be sort of shepherds or ambassadors or navigators to get them connected to the kind of services that they might need to get through.
That was very helpful and insightful, Dr. Primm. And on behalf of HBCUbiquity and the Tom Joyner Foundation, thank you for being part of today's conversation and for all that you've shared. We really appreciate this.
Oh, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, you have a great day, and we'll be back with more HBCUbiquity.
Before we get back to the HBCUbiquity podcast, let's take a look at some Tom Joyner Foundation fundraising highlights. Here's an example of TJF's success.
Hi, my name is Dante Webb, a junior majoring in physics at Dillard University. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the Dillard University Dallas Alumni Chapter and Tom Joyner Foundation for providing me with this scholarship. After graduation, I will attend Georgia Tech to obtain my master's in mechanical engineering.
To donate to the Tom Joyner Foundation, just log on to www.tomjoynerfoundation.org and you can help a student continue their education at a HBCU.
Bullying, anxiety, depression, academic pressure. As you've heard in today's conversations, those are some of the issues that many of our students, whether they attend an HBCU or PWI, are dealing with on a constant basis. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a counselor, far from it. But the Tom Joyner Foundation has been keeping students enrolled at HBCUs for over 20 years. I wouldn't say that we've seen it all, but we have seen a lot. We've donated over 29,000 scholarships for students attending HBCUs, scholarships of varying sizes. And over the years, mental health issues and concerns regarding some of our scholarship recipients have come to our attention. And that is the main reason why, especially over the last 5 years, that the Tom Joyner Foundation has donated additional funding for student support, both on and off campus, as a way to provide additional assistance and encouragement for some of our scholarship recipients to persist towards graduation. You know, I really would like to thank Dr. Kellie Dixon and Dr. Annelle Primm for being a part of today's conversations. This is not easy information to present or take in, but it's a conversation that we need to have, especially because that's what we do at HBCUbiquity, conversations with a purpose. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. To learn more about the Tom Joyner Foundation and the historically black colleges and universities that we support, please visit us at www.tomjoynerfoundation.org. Do you have a comment or question about this week's episode? Let us know on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at HBCUbiquity. Once again, that's HBCUbiquity. I'm Thomas Joyner Jr. Thanks for listening to this week's episode, and please subscribe and come back next week for another episode of HBCUbiquity.